two extraordinary stories of two extraordinary events. And I think it brings home to all of us how disasters don't just happen. It's the aftermath. And sometimes the aftermath just goes on and on and on, which means the responses have to keep continually evolving. We're very keen today to make this a conversation between us all, so I'd welcome questions from the floor for our two brilliant speakers. I think they've all been stunned into silence. I think by the enormity, the question there from the gentleman.
Good morning. My name's Peter Haggerty. I'm from the National Maritime Museum in Sydney. I'm actually going through at the moment our evacuation procedures, updating that. I'm interested to see how you're able to get it down to such a small document. Did you have outside help? I know you had the experience of that. Do you have outside help to come in?
No, we didn't. We didn't have outside help. We just decided that all that salvage material could be kept in the conservation labs or the collection storage, and it wasn't what you needed immediately. So we've pared it right back to what's needed immediately, to how the teams will be set up, to a communication strategy, and to the immediate. We've just recognised that a lot of what was in our plan initially was for later down the track.
So what you're really saying what you're saying, I suppose, is in a way, is that the disaster plan preparedness, you have to dance on your feet, and it's more of recovery, salvage mode. Is that right? Or
yeah. Well, at first you're in a completely stunned, and in fact we were just following our instincts. There's no time to read a plan when an earthquake's happening and people are literally falling over. It's so we have decided that it's much more important to use it in induction kits, to talk about it, to have the evacuations, certainly the normal procedures that you have, but to really pare it back so that the instructions are much more clear, and it's set out what gallery staff can expect of management, what management can expect of staff, if their circumstances allow it. You do have to take account of the people who've got children at home and that sort of thing. So it's just much simpler. It's not online at the moment, but we are putting it on online on our website, and I'll certainly show you a copy.
Thank you.
Further up the back, thank you.
Hi, Grant Collins from the State Library of Queensland. My question's for Kim. Just with regard to the 2011 floods in Brisbane being what was said to be a Q80 event, learnings from that and levels. One of the big problems we had here was knowing what a 5+ metre peak would mean. It didn't get to that, but what would that mean? Our learnings from that, and have they been communicated as to levels around the CBD and out to the regions as well?
Yeah, that's probably a question better put to other agencies in the QPS, but that was something that we really noticed was every time there's a flood in Queensland, it behaves differently. And even the flood this year, as opposed to last year, the flood behaves differently. So I understand how incredibly difficult it must be for you for planning purposes, but I know that a lot of interactive mapping has occurred, so hopefully there were some really good lessons learned out of last year, but it's not really something that I can comment on in any great depth.
And actually the earthquakes are different too. Sometimes they rock like this and sometimes they're more like that, and it's quite they have quite a different impact on people and buildings.
Christina Yarna, State Library of Queensland. I was interested to know about the social networking in Christchurch, or the opportunities for getting information out.
Yes, well, I mean, there's a sense in which, being in this particular session, I probably should have focused a wee bit more on that, but we were not the headquarters, our personnel were not, we were still the gallery, and the emergency headquarters were the ones that used the information networks more than we did. What we did, though, was certainly Twitter and use Facebook to talk about what we were doing and what was going on. So, you know, we had a picture of Prince William up pretty quickly too. But it was more letting our immediate supporters and people who follow our Facebook and Twitter know what was happening in the gallery. It wasn't our responsibility to communicate with the wider community.
Okay, there also was the other Christchurch group that was promoting what was happening in different areas and getting that information out there. Did you feed into that?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you're talking about.
There was a group of conservators and other people who got together and were passing on information quite quickly after the event and distributing information.
I can't imagine our conservators weren't among that group.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, I'm Ruth Quinn from Charles Darwin University Library. A question for Kim. The increase in the use of the social media was really interesting. Have you had to resource that activity, either financially or human resource-wise?
To a certain degree, yes. I have an additional 3 staff as a consequence of the work that we've been doing with social media. That said, we have moved from being probably 85% reactive in how we deal with media inquiries to being probably 70% proactive. I think last month we put out something like 300 media releases and did 30 media responses, whereas even 3 years ago it would have been the opposite. So we're actually pumping out information and putting it out proactively. While there is a work consequence of that, we're actually saving our work, saving on doing individual inquiries. So we're doing a lot of live streaming of our press conferences, so that journalists who can't get there don't then have to ring up and try and arrange a one-on-one interview. So it's swings and roundabouts to a certain degree, but we are finding that we're able to influence. Sorry, if I could just take a step back. I heard someone speak at a conference in Sydney, and they said that it was a really interesting example that they said that by the time something makes the mainstream media, its community has already made up its mind on that issue, that mainstream media isn't just reporting news anymore, it's reporting sentiment. So by the time you make it to the mainstream media, the community already has an opinion on that matter, and the media is actually reporting that. What we're doing is stepping in down here and helping them make their mind up on stuff. We're actually being a part of that conversation to influence community sentiment. So hopefully saving work or working a little bit smarter.
We've certainly found in the gallery that the media, the mainstream media, pick up things on our Facebook and Twitter before they do the official press release as well. Mm. And like you, we didn't have a policy in this area, but we just fired ahead. And policy is now in place, but I mean, wouldn't have a clue what it is, because we're sort of renegades in our community. And art gallery, we do. But it's certainly, we're finding we rely less on press releases and more on and the press, which is our local newspaper, like the Courier Mail here, will pick things up immediately and ring us more before press releases have gone out. So it really is a worthwhile medium to...
The other thing I would say is we've reached a point that I think the latest information I have is every day we get 1.8 million story views on our social media. So we've got a pretty strong voice out there now.
Hi, I'm Zane Jackson from Transport Main Roads. I just wanted to ask him a question. With the Facebook comments that come on from people in disasters, how much time do you spend moderating them and keeping an eye on them as opposed to putting up new information? Just imagine with other aspects of police work, there could be some error if, getting into defamation or, the legal side of things. How much time do you spend moderating those comments?
That's something that really kept me up at night when I first started the Facebook page. But we've done a couple of things that have worked quite well. We've worked really hard to educate our online community how to behave on our page. When you go to our page, there are very clear terms of use, and we tell you when we're going to remove one of your comments. Also, since the floods last year, we've come across some really great automated tools which enable us to make sure that the F-bomb never shows up on the QPS Facebook page. Or any other, you can do blacklists so that anyone who swears that the post is automatically spammed, so it never pops up. Love that tool to death. That said, we may remove, depends on the topic, of course. There are some really, really emotive topics. I had a chuckle the other day. We put a post up, I think it was an awful story about a baby that had been murdered. I got up in the morning and it said 576 comments, and I clicked on it and you could see about 6 of them. So there are topics that people really get very agitated about, but we've worked really hard to educate people about what's appropriate to put on our page, what isn't appropriate to put on our page. So it's not as much work as it would seem. During the floods, it was almost no work because Queenslanders and the world at large were of one mind. Everyone wanted to help. Everyone was focused on the floods. Everyone was being really supportive. When the floods settled down, we went through about 3 weeks where I was going to close the page down because we had that nice little community going where everyone knew how to behave and they all sort of told each other how to behave. Then we had that massive increase in numbers. We had all these people who weren't familiar with the way the page operated, and it went feral. It was awful, and I was like, oh, what are we doing? But slowly people, we just kept reinforcing the rules, and now we spend very little time moderating the page, and we know what topics people are going to get really agitated about, and we do some front-end loading, please remember this matters before court, or, please be circumspect in your statements. A real hotspot for us is we do a lot of road safety stuff, and we talk about don't drive through flooded waters, and we really hammer that in. But then on the occasion when someone does and they die, people want to get on there and say, why did they drive through flooded waters? And we go, no, this isn't the time for that, folks. Their families are reading this thread. You don't know what happened. Just be circumspect in what you're saying. And slowly that message is getting through as well. That's becoming less and less. So it's just about educating the community in what we expect from them on our threads as well.
Thank you very much. Kate and I thought long and hard about what would be the appropriate gifts to give our speakers today, and we thought, keeping in with the disaster theme, and particularly the aftermath, once you've looked after your people and you've looked after your collections and you've mopped up and tidied up, you need a bit of comfort. And what could be more appropriate than chocolate? And because I'm from South Australia, it's Hague's.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much indeed. I will be popular when I go back. Oh, good.